Hi, everyone. Welcome to our next session of Sound Doctrine. My name is Pastor Scott, and it's great to have you here with us as we continue our series looking through different elements of systematic theology. Our study today brings us to Angelology. As you can tell from the title, we'll be talking about angels and specifically relating to God's elect angels, demons. We'll get a little bit into Satan in our study here, but we'll primarily just focus in a general sense on the spiritual realm and what does this mean. So hopefully you are ready to go and that you've got our notes off of the Facebook group here, our Whiteboard group, and you're ready to learn some things about angels. As I've studied this, it has definitely been a great refresher for me to learn some of these things, not just about angels in general, but also about the character of God, why God does what he does. And even at the end there, we'll get into some application on what this means for you and I in our daily lives. So probably a good question to start, and maybe a question that you're even asking as we're starting, is why angelology? Why study the study of the spiritual realm? Like, what does that mean for us? Well, angels are discussed throughout Scripture. And just that fact alone, the fact that angels are mentioned repeatedly in the Bible, would tell us that it's something that we should study and be aware of. It may not be an area of doctrine that we spend a ton of time looking at in our study of theology and doctrine, but because it is in there, it's worthy of study. So just that fact alone is good for us, because it does help us better understand who God is and what he does, the relationship of angels to mankind, because there is a relationship, and it can help us better understand just God's general purposes. There definitely has been a fascination with angels over the centuries. And if you've ever watched any type of angel TV show, I remember when I was a kid watching Highway to Heaven with Michael Landon, where he was an angel. There was the other TV show, Touched by an Angel, which had a whole bunch of angels. That was, 20 years or so ago. That's just a couple examples in the last couple decades of, even in popular culture, how angels have made its way into our living rooms. But, really for over a millennia, people have really been fascinated with angels and have come up with ideas about what angels do, who angels are, how they work, how they interrelate with us. And quite honestly, there's quite a bit of false information that has been propagated relating to what an angel is and what an angel does and how they kind of came into existence and how we relate to them as people. So hopefully as we look at the scriptures here, we'll see some different ideas. Some people have held to the idea that when humans die, they become angels. We'll hit on that real quick. Some people have come up with the idea that there's baby angels and things like that, and we'll mention those things as we go through our study today. So thankfully the Bible does give us enough good sound doctrine to better understand angels, so we'll dive right into that right now. Angels and demons. Does the scripture talk about the reality of angels and demons? Absolutely. I mean, if it didn't, we probably wouldn't be here right now, but it does talk about angels and demons. You see this in both the Old and the New Testament. Both the Old and New Testaments consistently talk about the reality of the spiritual realm. And there's consistency in how that spiritual realm is presented in both the Old and the New Testaments. So in the Old Testament, there are 116 references in 107 verses relating to angels in the spiritual realm. Most of these are in the book of Judges and Zechariah. There's quite a few in Zechariah. Interesting, and we'll see this also in the New Testament, but books that are more apocalyptic or end times in nature definitely have a larger influx of the angel word or angel concepts mixed into that apocalyptic literature. Like in the New Testament, there are 180 mentions in 176 verses in the New Testament. Most of these are in Revelation, But importantly, it's mentioned in all four Gospels. It's mentioned by both Paul and Peter, and also Jude, and the writer to the Hebrews. So as you look across the New Testament, there's definitely agreement, there's definitely mention of it. So it's not just something that was happening in the Old Testament pre-Christ incarnate. You see examples of angels and their ministry in both of the Testaments. So that's pretty important. It's something that God is definitely using throughout the ages. Let's talk about angels and their creation. So you see the notes kind of pop up here, the titles pop up here on the screen as I mention these things, but also follow along in the notes and you'll kind of see where I'm going here. Let's talk about their creation, the fact of their creation. You can sometimes watch movies and things like that where it would give the impression or the insinuation that angels have always been in existence. That ever since there's been a God, there's been angels. That's not true. There was a point in history or in God's plan where angels were not in existence. Like everything other than God, they had a beginning. Everything had a beginning other than God. So that would include angels. So at one point, when it was just the triune God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, there were no angels. They were created at a point in time. Colossians 1:16 kind of hones in on which part of the Godhead really had the role in creation. Students of the Bible, who've been studying the Bible for years, know the fact that Colossians 1:16 says, "For by him all things were created," speaking about Christ, "in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions, rulers or authorities," and those are different classifications of angels, which we'll see in a few minutes. "All things were created through him and for him." So that's speaking about Christ and his creative role in all of creation, not just in angels, but in all of creation. It was one of the prerogatives of the Godhead for the second part of the Trinity, the Word, to be the creator. So you see that from Colossians 1:16. When exactly did their creation happen? We can pretty much pinpoint it based on a couple different passages of Scripture, which we'll look at right now. So the Bible in Genesis 2:1 indicates that by the end of the sixth day of creation, everything had been created. So from day 1 to day 6, in that span of time, everything that we know to be true in our universe was created, which would also include angels. So angels were created sometime between day 1 and day 6. Interesting, going a little deeper into that, the book of Job tells us that angels were present at the creation of the world and rejoiced to see it. So if you'd like, you can turn in your Bibles to Job 38, verses 4 to 7, Job 38, 4 to 7, which is where God is rebuking Job and saying to him, "Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Who stretched the line upon it? Or what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy, or who shut in the sea with doors." Job 38, 4 to 7. So the morning stars there, the sons of God reference there would be relating to angels. Angels. So it was angels that were singing together with joy when the earth was being created. So it seems like God created the heavens and the angels at the same time, followed by the earth on day 1. So we can kind of piece together a couple of those scriptures to allow us to see that likely the angels were created before the earth because they were there rejoicing when the earth was created, and were likely created when the heavens were created, Genesis 1:1. So that's the fact of their creation, the timing of their creation. Let's talk about their nature real quick. So angels have personalities. Angels have personality. So what does that mean? What does it mean that an angel has a personality? Well, to quote Dr. Charles Ryrie, something is a person that has intellect, emotions, and will. Intellect, emotions, and will. So in other words, they have the ability of their own volition to act relationally. They are self-aware of their existence. So they can act with intellect, emotions, and will. So they have personalities. So they can interrelate with people, they can dialogue, they can think. They're spirits, but they're personalities, which takes us to number 2. They definitely are spirit beings, as you see there in their notes, in your notes. They are spirit beings. So they, like God, are spirits. They're not God, very clear with that. They're not God, but like God, they are spirits. They don't have physical bodies like we have. Now, many times in the Old Testament or the New Testament, when an angel appears, it appears that they have a physical body. That could just be the manifestation of that spirit in a human body so the humans can interrelate with them, but they do not have physical bodies because they are spirits. They're constantly called spirits throughout Scripture. And you can look at Hebrews 1:14 for one such example of that. So they have personalities. They are spirit beings. Importantly, they are immortal and they don't procreate or propagate. So as spirits, they're not prone to human limitations like we are. So we die, but they are immortal, meaning since their creation, they have lived perpetually. So an angel doesn't die. Angels that have been created since the first day of creation have lived perpetually since that time. And Matthew 22:30 made it very clear that we will be like the angels when we are in heaven, in the fact that, like the angels do not procreate, we will be like them where we will not be procreating in heaven or the new earth. So in other words, angels do not make baby angels. So that's important to note because that would be a popular idea. So they don't propagate and they have been living perpetually since their creation. And then subpoint 4 in your notes there. They are higher creatures than men. They're higher creatures than men. Hebrews 2:7-9 talks about man being made a little lower than the angels. So this is seen in their superiority now, because an angel can obviously do a lot more than a human can do. An angel can interrelate with God at his throne. But in the future, it will be man that is judging the angels. Good cross-reference for that would be 1 Corinthians 6:3. As you can see in your notes, it would be man that is judging the angels in the future. So in God's plan, humans are the ones that are actually judging the angels. Okay, so we've talked about the fact that they have been created. We've talked about the timing of their creation. We've talked about their nature. Let's talk a little bit about their organization. So even though the Bible doesn't go into great detail on the spiritual realm, so you don't read chapters and chapters about how angels work and kind of like how they interrelate with each other and their functions on the earth. There's not books and books of the Bible that are devoted to this, but there are some passages of Scripture which give us some idea as to how they're arranged, some ideas to their hierarchy, some ideas to their purposes. So let's talk about that right now. First of all, like you can see in your notes, let's talk about their numbers. Okay, so how many angels are there? Okay, so the Bible doesn't give us a number like 2,468,000. The Bible doesn't tell us that. But you do get close to an idea as to just how many there are in a passage like Revelation 5:11, where it says the number of angels around the throne was myriads of myriads, some translations would say. Or another translation would say tens of thousands or something like that. But in Greek, the phrase can mean incalculable, an incalculable amounts. So that could be millions, is what their numbers could indicate there. Scripture goes into some detail in their rankings. So this gets into some of the scriptural particulars of angels and their roles. So the Bible mentions that some angels have a classification or an order. How so? Well, as you see in your subpoint there, archangels. So Jude 9 refers to Michael as being an archangel. And that's one of the classifications that the scripture presents of an angel. So let's just read that verse together. Jude 9, and you see it on the screen here. Jude 9 says, "But when the archangel Michael contended with the devil, was disputing about the body of Moses, he did not presume to pronounce a blasphemous judgment, but said, 'The Lord rebuke you.'" All right, so that's one passage of scripture that indicates that there is a classification of angel called archangel, and that would be Michael, based on what Jude says there in Jude 9. But also Michael in the book of Daniel is referred to as the guardian of Israel. Okay, so that's interesting even in of itself, the guardian of Israel. Other angels are also indicated to have a role in regions of the world. So there's a real interesting passage of scripture in the book of Daniel, chapter 10, which is where Daniel is praying to the Lord, and the Lord is sending an answer to Daniel via an angel, and an angel comes to him, but explains to Daniel that he had been withheld from coming to Daniel because of spiritual activity. So the prince of Persia had actually withheld this angel from coming, and Michael had to come and somewhat rescue this angel so he could bring the message to Daniel. You can see that in Daniel chapter 10. Likewise, in the book of Daniel, chief princes are referred to in the book of Daniel. Paul mentions several classifications of the spirit world using words like rulers, principalities, powers. We saw that in the Colossians 1:16 reference earlier. Cherubim were higher ranking angels. And the book of Ezekiel, chapter 28, verses 14 and 16, says the fact that Satan was one of these cherubim. There were also, these angels, cherubim, were also the angels that were created on the Ark of the Covenant, the angels that were on the top of the Ark of the Covenant with their wings over the mercy seat. These were cherubim. Seraphim are also a part of the angelic hierarchy. So the scripture mentions these. The scripture talks about some of what they do, but that's kind of about it as far as the detail that scripture goes into. And any temptation or any desire to kind of go deeper into that and try to figure more of that out and somehow try to leverage that in spiritual warfare or dealing with spirits is really taking the scripture to places that it doesn't go. We just kind of need to leave it what the scripture says and just take it as facts that this is the hierarchy, some of the hierarchy that scripture has been revealed to us by God. So that's their organization. Let's talk about their ministry. Their ministry. So they do have a ministry in relation to God. You can see this in your notes. Angels have always seemed to have a special role in how they serve God and in God's program. It's kind of interesting to see how angels interact with God's plan to the earth throughout the scripture. The scripture does show angels praising the Lord, worshiping God, serving God, rejoicing in his work, and they're also seen executing God's judgments and directives on the earth. Also, as you're well aware from the nativity story, they proclaimed Christ's birth. So they announced Christ's birth when he came. They served Christ at different times during his life. You could see that at his temptation, at the conclusion of his tempting or his temptation with Satan. Angels came and ministered to him. You can see angels ministering to Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. And also they're there at the resurrection. So there were points in time, even in the life of Christ, that angels were active. But angels also have a relationship to believers. So one of the primary roles of angels is to help believers. Let's just look at that verse real quick. Let's look at Hebrews 1:14. All right, so let's go to the book of Hebrews, chapter 1, verse 14. So in the book of Hebrews, as the writer of the Hebrews is talking about the superiority of Christ, specifically relating to angels, he gets into some detail here as to who these ministering spirits are. Verse 14 of Hebrews 1. Are they not all ministering spirits, talking about angels, are they not all ministering spirits sent out to serve for the sake of those who are to inherit salvation. Who inherits salvation? Believers. Believers inherit salvation. So ministering spirits, angels, are set up to serve for the sake of those who inherit salvation. So angels, in some capacity, have a role in your life in what they are serving behind the scenes. And we can somewhat leave it at that. But there's also another passage of Scripture, because a question that frequently gets asked in relationship to angels is, do believers have a guardian angel? Why would they ask that? Well, let's flip to a passage of Scripture and just look at that real quick. Matthew chapter 18. Matthew chapter 18, where Jesus is talking about little ones and care for little ones. And he says in Matthew 18:10, "See that you do not despise one of these little ones, for I tell you that in heaven their angels always see the face of my Father who is in heaven." So when people are thinking about guardian angels, that's typically the passage that they go to, because as Jesus is saying, be careful how you treat little ones, because their angels are always in the presence of God and see the presence of God in heaven, which would lead us to believe that there's a classification of humans. There are a segment of humans which have special angelic guardianship or oversight. And if you were to get really specific with the text here, it could just be limited to little ones or children. But again, when it comes to these areas of doctrine where there's not a lot of information given all throughout Scripture on that particular point of the spirit world, it's best just to leave it at that and really not take it much further than that, because that's really all that the Scripture says about it. All right, let's go into the role of demons today. The role of demons. So demons, like angels, are active today in the world, carrying out the plans of Satan. So Satan is called the prince of demons in Matthew 12:24. As you see in your notes, there are demons that we as believers wrestle against. So over these next kind of subpoints here, we're going to go through some different ways that demons are interrelating or not interrelating in the world today based on circumstances that have happened in history. So we'll kind of look at that right now. Currently, there are demons that we as believers wrestle against. Why do we say that? Why don't you flip over with me to Ephesians chapter 6. Ephesians chapter 6, where Paul here is talking about being strong in the Lord and the strength of his might and the armor of God, so that you can stand against the schemes of the devil. Why is that, Paul? Why do we need to stand against the schemes of the devil and be strong in the Lord? He says in verse 12, we don't wrestle against flesh and blood. So it's almost like Paul is saying, our primary resistance that we have to the things that we are doing for the Lord on this earth are not primarily relating to flesh and blood. So the things you can see, the things you can touch, people. Well, then what is it? Paul says in verse 12, we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. So Paul is saying there's a whole element behind the scenes that is happening, that is in the spirit realm, that does have an impact on what we're doing in the work of God. Okay, so what does that mean for us as Christians? Does that mean that we should be focusing 99% of our time on the spiritual realm and rebuking and binding and doing all these things that the Scripture doesn't really tell us to do? No, what does it do? What does the Scripture say here? Paul tells us to take up the armor of God. So when he talks about being able to stand against spiritual forces, he talks about the armor of God and putting on all those different elements of the armor of God so that you can stand against evil. And particularly the sword of the Spirit, the Scriptures. being one of the most important ones there that Paul talks about, so that we can stand against the wiles of Satan. So I think it's really important here that we just remember that even though there are these spiritual activities happening around us, our primary focus should be on God and what He's doing, and not so much Satan and what he's doing. When our focus is on Christ and His work, and our focus is on holiness and righteousness and goodness and all the things that God wants us thinking about and living about, we just are obedient to what God tells us to do, and we carry on His work, cognizant of the fact that there is more happening behind the scenes. So it's important for us to remember that. Also, as you see in your notes, there are demons that can be and have been confined. So this is basically taken from Luke chapter 8, where Jesus is interacting with some demons, and He's about to cast these demons out. And they are begging Him to not send them to the abyss. So they beg Jesus, please don't send us to the abyss. So apparently that is a place that demons, because they asked specifically for Jesus to not send them there, that must be a place that demons don't want to go. So we can conclude from that there are demons that can be and have been confined. And so because they didn't want to go to the abyss, that must mean that there are some already in the abyss. And so right now we can likely conclude that there are demons in an abyss. There are some demons that are temporarily confined. We're kind of getting into a subclassification here. And at the end here, we're going to put up a little diagram so you can kind of see it for yourself. But there are some demons that are temporarily confined. What would we base that off of? Basically from Revelation chapter 9, verses 1 to 15, where during the tribulation period, Satan is granted the ability to open up the abyss and allow demons residing in the abyss to exit and afflict the earth during the tribulation period. So demons that are in the abyss is opened up, and they are afflicting the earth. You can see that from Revelation 9, 1 to 15. So there are some demons that are in a holding abyss that are opened up to afflict the earth. Continuing on, there are some demons that are permanently confined until judgment. Where do we see that? 2 Peter 2:4 and Jude 6, as you see in your notes. 2 Peter 2:4 and Jude 6 talk about this. Demons who left their natural confines and were judged for this sin, they were confined, maybe in the abyss, until judgment. A lot of discussion among Bible teachers as to what these demons did, leaving their natural abode to have God send them into an abyss to stay there permanently until judgment. Some people believe it's related to what we see in Genesis 6. There's just a lot of different opinions on that. But regardless of your opinions as to what they did to get there, 2 Peter 2:4 and Jude 6 make it clear that there are demons that are there now. All right? So, as I mentioned, that all could seem a little confusing. The fact that we do go up against demons now. There are demons that can be confined. There are demons that are temporarily confined. There are demons that are permanently confined. I'm just going to pull up this chart right here, full screen, so that you can see this for yourself. So you can kind of see how this diagram kind of works itself out with demons in general, those that are confined, those that are temporarily confined, and those that are permanently confined. And we got this information from Basic Theology from Charles Ryrie. All right, so what does this have to do for you and me? Okay, so that's a good question. What does this have to do for you and me? All this study of angels and demons and their activity, what does this have to do for you and I? Okay, so 3 things I want us to kind of bring up here as we wrap up. Number 1, God's program is a lot bigger than you and me. And I take that from Daniel chapter 10, verses 12 to 14, which is where I was relating to you the circumstances of Daniel praying, and God answering that prayer and sending an angel to answer that prayer and bring the message. But he was delayed for 30 days by the prince of Persia. Interesting story, factual story. It actually happened. And Daniel would have had no idea about that had that angel not told him that. So in other words, and again, we don't want to head down a bunch of mental rabbit trails when it comes to thinking about all the circumstances that are happening in our lives and, is the devil or a demon behind every corner influencing. I don't know that that would be appropriate, but I think it would be appropriate to at least be aware of the fact that there's much more happening in God's program than we as humans realize. There's a whole spiritual element to what God is doing that we simply are not aware of. That doesn't mean that we have to tap into it. We definitely should be aware of it. That's pretty important. So there's a lot happening behind the scenes in God's program that we can't see. We have no idea what's happening, but God's program is a lot bigger than we realize. That'd be the first thing. So there's a lot of things happening. Number two, and this is just an interesting concept to think about. Angels watch the activity of the church. You see this in Ephesians 3:10, and you see this in 1 Corinthians 11:10. So specifically in the 1 Corinthians 11 passage where Paul is talking about head coverings and appropriateness in the church and some of the reasons for that, he specifically mentions angels that are watching these things and that we somehow are setting an example in these things. So for some reason, God in his plan has angels watching us in church, even during worship services and things like that. Our activity somehow in God's plan has an impression on angels. This is why, one of the reasons why Paul wanted the church to do things respectfully and decently and in order, because somehow in God's plan, the angels were watching and it made an impression upon them. And Paul thought that was important enough to mention. So maybe that's something that we should take into consideration also. Number three, it assures us of God's providential care. Okay, so in God's design, somehow in God's design, he has angels participating in our care. Okay, they're ministering spirits that are meeting needs and helping us in different ways. That's from Hebrews 1:14. And potentially, if we all have guardian angels, there's angels that are interacting with us in our daily activities. That should not preclude us in our understanding of God and his ultimate role in our protection. But somehow in God's sovereignty and in God's plan, he has the spiritual realm interrelating with the physical realm with what is happening. So God has taken the time, both with things that he's presented to us in his word, but also things that are happening behind the scenes to ensure that we are cared for. So that should cause us to be greatly appreciative of who God is and his character and his love and his concern and his grace. Not just for physically the things we can see that he's taking care of, but to a certain extent behind the scenes in his care for us also. Well, that's our study of angelology, and there is a lot more we could get into. As we mentioned in all these different classes that we're taking, we're just kind of giving a surface idea of these different areas of doctrine. I would encourage you to do a study for yourself, a little deeper study for yourself on the study of angels, and allow that to refresh your thinking and also minister to your spirit. And we want to thank you for watching. Feel free you can leave comments below the video here or questions, and Pastor Justin or myself will do our best to answer them for you. Thanks so much for watching.